of course they're not going to fix that. That's not making any money. We're going to fix this. You might want to do something like the business language is a big bet.
Yeah.
So what is the next big step I should take in my product? Should we be building for a new audience? Should we be building some new aspect of the product?
Welcome to She Talks Business. In this episode, we have design leader Jane Austen. With a history of leading digital transformations, Jane has held leadership roles at organizations like Telegraph, Moo & Babylon, and is now the Senior Vice President at Contentsquare.
Her most interesting insights come from bridging the gap between good design and great business. She has built product and design teams from the ground up and led large global teams, helping organizations leverage product-led growth. A sought-after speaker, Jane delivers keynotes at major conferences around the world.
Hi, Jane. It's really, really nice to meet you and really nice to host you today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm going to start right off the bat with one of the statements that I saw on your LinkedIn, which goes, I build products for humans that solve real problems where experience is a differentiator. Now, that's like a loaded statement with a lot of nice things in there. Can you kind of unpack it for us a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So I think it's the culmination of my career, what I've been working on for the last 20 years and what I've realised is really important and meaningful to me. So first thing is I work in design and product, and I love building products. My design isn't for making things pretty, it's not for print, it's for building products. And it's not just thinking about what the product looks like, it's all the aspects of it, including the business. So that's why I focused on products. Secondly, for humans, well, that's what I love doing. I love making people's lives easier. I love building things that people are actually going to use, whether that's direct to consumer, and that's kind of obvious there's going to be a human using that, but B2B as well. And I think sometimes the human's forgotten in B2B because you have the people buying the product and the people using the product, and the focus is often on selling to the people who are buying the product. And the people who are using it are forgotten. And there's some tools that you and I have just spoken about, and I won't mention, which are absolutely horrific and where you're forced to use them as part of your job. And it's like the end user's just been completely forgotten. I know I've been beating my head off the desk trying to book holidays or do my expenses in some of these tools. So I think it's really important to consider the end user, because actually that's where I think a lot of the B2B companies are going to win. Looking at things like Notion, which was founded by a designer. That's not just a database tool, that's an experience. So I think that's really important to think about the end user, because that is where you're going to differentiate, which takes me to my last statement, that experience is a differentiator. So I think that's really important as well, that thinking about how you're going to use, or people are going to use the product, how it's going to be different to other products, that you're competing on the ease of use and the time to value, and that people really find your product useful to their everyday life. That's the three, if you put those three statements together, that's what I love doing in my career.
Yeah, no, and it's so interesting because we all use products every day, whether it's digital or physical, and we don't give much thought to the people who are creating it and keeping us at the focus of it, right? Like people like yourselves. So tell us a little bit about your kind of journey into product design and how you kind of landed there, because it's a really, really interesting kind of field.
Oh, yes, it's wonderful. So I'm obviously a bit older. So I did a philosophy degree just right at the start of the internet, which made me, I did a master's in philosophy, which made me almost unemployable. Like, what do you do with a philosophy degree? But actually, you do a lot of things with a philosophy degree, because it teaches you how to think and how to critically evaluate things. And somehow that led me into doing user experience, or thinking about like how people were using the tools. And back in the day, that was like when everything was so new, you could spend days designing a checkout flow because a checkout flow didn't exist. Obviously now it's everything has a checkout flow, and you're thinking even more deeply about the purpose of products. But back then it was like more like usability.
Yeah.
And then I think I've kind of grown up with the internet. My career's grown up with the internet. So as things have got more complex, I've started doing more complex things. As tools have got more complex, I've started using them and started to understand. I mentioned earlier that experience is a differentiator. So you don't need to spend a lot of time reimagining a checkout flow. That's work's already been done. But you can spend a lot of time thinking about how you can make something complex really easy, or give people time to value. If they're spending money on something, getting that value to them much more quickly, or using digital tools for behavioural change.
Yeah.
So as I said, I think I've grown up with the internet, and my career's grown with the internet, and the complexity has grown. So that's my journey, is kind of you mapped to the way that products design and products, exactly, the evolution.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the company that you work at, Contentsquare. Can you tell us a little bit about what they do, how you ended up there, and why Contentsquare is the company for you at this time?
Yeah, I love Contentsquare. I've been there. Yesterday was my first month anniversary. I've been there a month.
Oh, sweet.
I'm so excited to be there. The reason there's lots of reasons why I think it's the company for me, but one of them is going through that sort of transformation to be more customer centric, which is something I love. They're already very customer centric, but they want to take it to the next level and focus on ease of use. And that's really, really exciting. The other thing is that the Contentsquare is basically a tool that allows marketers, product people, designers, tech people to understand how people are using their product and make it as great an experience as possible. So this is a tool that enables other people to make great experiences. Like, what better thing to work on? And
can you give us an example of what you mean by that?
So you can put Contentsquare on your website, and you can see maybe something's broken on it and that you didn't realise and it was driving people crazy, so you could fix that. That might also be costing money. Or you can see that maybe you have something that looks like it's clickable, but it's not, and it's really confusing people. So there's sort of interface changes you can make. You can understand how people move through your products. So you might see that there's like journeys that you hadn't anticipated where you were losing people that you could optimize. You're able to see session replays to see what people are actually doing and understand sort of the why behind the what, and then improve the product from that. You can run sort of experiments and see how people are reacting to it. You can do surveys and voice of the customer. You can see multi-sessions, so people they might come to your product over several days and then buy, so that you can see this whole spectrum of what's happening on your product and use that to make really informed decisions about the end user experience. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and it's where the data is, isn't it?
Yes.
It gives you the data that leads you to make the right decision in changing your product. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting you say that, because for when you started off in this career, it wasn't a normal kind of everyday career that people used to have, right? And you said you grew up with the internet. So I feel like, has it been a very steep learning curve? Because we've gone from the advent of the web and the internet to Web3, AI, like we've gone the whole spectrum in your lifetime.
Yes.
And I feel like you are of that generation, which is basically just seen a lot more than any other generation has seen. Like
that change,
some generations are going to grow up with like technology as just, it's a language for them. It's normal.
That's true, yeah. So I sort of came into adulthood just as the internet was becoming really, really important. I was probably one of the last generations that didn't have access to a phone, didn't have, I remember going to music festivals and there was no way we could meet up with each other. So you'd have to agree a bit and say, we'll see you there on the hour, and then just go and try and find each other. Or when you were meeting people or navigating, having no digital tools made it so difficult. I remember going to India and trying to navigate with a guidebook.
Oh, wow.
But so I've seen that change from completely offline to that blend of online and offline, whereas my daughter has basically grown up with fully digital. So I think it's been quite an interesting time to be alive. So for me, the complexity, because I became an adult as the internet was growing, the complexity grew with me, but I can see people from older generations really, really struggling, which I think is really bad. You can see, and I'm going off on a slight tangent here, but it's something I'm quite passionate about. You see with older people, they have to have apps to book a doctor's appointment, or they have to use chat in order to contact their electricity supplier. So I think that's really bad. Yeah. I think there's still that generational shift that hasn't quite gone. So some people are being left behind.
Yeah, and I think that's where your role comes in, right? As a product designer, as to how to make these products easier for people with certain different kinds of experiences.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's definitely one aspect of it as well. And thinking about accessibility. So not everybody is able-bodied and able to use the app and able to read and able to perceive things. So I think it's really interesting to make sure that you're designing things for as wide a range of people as possible.
There was like one piece of advice.
Yes.
That you wish you had gotten as your younger self in the product space, or that you could give someone who's aspiring to be a product designer. Based on your experience, what would it be?
So I think that as product designers, we don't get told enough about the business. I've done an MBA and it just made me a much better designer. So I'm not so much on the craft anymore. I'm more about the strategy. So I suppose it also depends where you want to take your career. But if you want to sort of move into more into leadership and strategy, I think it's really important to understand how businesses work and how organisations work and why this design might be better than this and why part of the design you're not going to compete there. It's not a differentiator. You might just have to let that bit of the design not be great. And you might have to focus your attention on another aspect of the product because that's where you're competing. And I know that and also I've seen it with lots of colleagues, would be so frustrated and saying to people like, why can't we get this fixed? I've seen so many people struggling with this in research. Why is this still so bad? But now I've done my MBA, now I'm a bit older and I really understand how businesses operate. I'm like, well, of course they're not going to fix that. That's not making any money. We're going to fix this. Yeah. And it stopped me being stressed and anxious. And it also helps me to talk about what I'm doing through the lens of the end impact, not just for the user, but for the business.
Yeah.
And that's made me a lot more credible as a designer.
Yeah.
So my advice would be that design is not about decoration. Design is about basically the surface of technology, strategy and business, and it's the surface layer on top. And it's vitally important to business. And as I was mentioning earlier, there's some of the biggest startups, the most successful startups right now, like Canva, Notion, Figma, Airbnb, they've all been founded by designers.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting is like design is sort of threaded all the way through. And when I say that design is the surface, I mean that also it should be threaded through, but it is also the sort of tangible aspect of all of this strategy, all of this business, all of this technology. And design is what makes it tangible and connects it to the end user. So I think it's really important to know that design, because it's bringing together technology, business, humans, your job is to understand all of this so you can surface it in the best way for the end user, then to make money for the business. And I think design is a business driver. It's a strategic driver, and designers should know this and be able to talk about it in a way that then it's recognised.
You spoke earlier about doing a philosophy degree, which is obviously really interesting. So, and I think that has a lot, like in the corporate world or in any kind of business, the human behavior or human behavior in general is just such a big part of your job. It's not taught. You can't learn it. It's very inherent. You have to learn on the job. Being a product designer, what would you say are top human aspects or behaviors that you've seen come to play when designing a product, for both internally in terms of an organization, but also externally for the customer?
Oh gosh, that's a really, really complex question. So just to make sure I understand, you're asking for what sort of aspects of human psychology have I seen when I'm designing for customers?
Yeah.
One of them is that like people are lazy. People are inherently lazy, so they really don't want to have to work for things like the cognitive load. And I know sometimes I will happily like click things, rather than thinking. So if I have to think and go and retrieve a password and then type it in, that actually feels quite painful.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll just take the easiest route. So thinking about people are lazy, they don't want to have to think, making it easy for them as possible. The other thing is that people don't pay attention.
Yes.
So you have to really sometimes have a flashing button or realise that they don't know where they are on a website. You have to bring absolute clarity.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is people want to feel satisfied. They want to be excited. They want to feel that there's a reason they're doing something, that there's a reward. So I think when you're designing things or building or innovating, you have to think, what is that so what? Why would somebody come and use your product? What is it they're getting out of the other end? So they're my top three things I think
very,
about.
very good. Very well answered. And all very, very actually topical. Like I can totally see me as a customer feeling all those things.
Yes.
And I think that is just because we have so many things. Like the world is just so full on at the moment for everyone, right? Like it's not like we're just doing one thing at a time. We're multitasking and like we want our basic everyday things, like you said earlier, doctor's appointment or things that we just need to get done, and insurance or mortgages and things. We just want it to be easy because that's not what our bread and butter comes from. So we want to focus our energies on, kind of our jobs and things. And so I completely see that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about when you're creating designing a product. I'm sure when you're kind of visioning the product or creating the vision for it, to when it's actually come into fruition, there's a journey there. And there's also I don't know, but I don't know for yourself, but sometimes when we're working, we start off with a very clear vision. And along the way, we sometimes lose sight of that. How do you keep focused on that vision? And what is the journey from visioning to fruition?
Well, there's two types of journeys here. One of them I'd say is what's known as 0 to 1. So 0, like nothing exists at all. And then 1, you bring something to life, to fruition. And that's generally the startup journey, or the internal innovation journey. So from there, I think the best way to do that is to recognize a customer need. Like what is a problem that someone's having that you can solve better than anyone else and that they're willing to pay for?
Yeah.
That's the foundation of a digital business. You have to start with a real concrete, tangible problem, and that you can know that you can solve it, or you hope you can solve it better than anyone else, and that your people were willing to pay. So there's your 3 elements. And once you've got that, I think you have to do the least you possibly can to make sure that you're still right, your assumptions are correct. So look at what all of your assumptions are, pick out the riskiest one and do some kind of an experiment. Maybe it's a landing page, maybe it's some interviews. And from there you gradually build up confidence and you move along. So maybe the next thing you might do is some surveys, some more like widespread data, some deeper research, and then you build maybe a small part of the app, and then you just keep going, keep iterating until you've got to the point you've something that's we call it a minimum viable product. You can maybe put this in the market, experiment to see if people will pay and use it, and then you just gradually build from there. So you go from quite open research, narrow it down into building something, and then you iterate. And that's kind of for any startup or any innovation. But then if you have a product that exists, you might want to do something like the business language is a big bet. So what is the next big step I should take in my product? Should we be building for a new audience? Should we be building some new aspect of the product? And from there, you pretty much follow the same process. You understand, is this right? You do the least you can do to understand if you're going in the right direction. So lots of little experiments, build it in little increments, and then release. So the same thing, I think, is just don't rush to spend all your money building one big thing without any certainty. The whole point of building products and a product design and product is to build that certainty and confidence before you spend any money on the next step. And then make sure that you're delighting the customer and they're going to give you money back.
Very, very interesting. And you've worked at companies like the breadth of them. So you've done some work at the Telegraph, you've been the head of product design there, I believe. You've done some work at Babylon. And so a lot of these have been in the digital space. What is kind of the difference been between some of these work streams that you've, like the different jobs that you've done? And did you ever consider doing physical products?
No, I've always been digital. Never ever considered doing physical products. So I think the whole, even though they're both design, the whole structure and process are really, really quite different. And I have no concept or clue at all about physical products. So you asked about the different jobs that I've done. Well, I think the difference between them is that they're obviously different sort of business models, but underlying, they've actually all been very, very similar. I've joined the companies at a point where they're going through some kind of change, whether it's a digital transformation like the Telegraph, so increasing or improving all their websites, building new things, building new digital products, building a digital subscription model. Or at Moo, when there was a new brand, changing the front end of the website, building new products for Moo. Babylon took that from being quite a simple app where you would book appointments, and there was obviously a fantastic AI tool, to a really complex ecosystem where you could track your health, you could get physical appointments, you could get prescriptions. Each of these has been that cusp of going from something that was maybe not quite digital or something that was quite simple through to this transformation to a big, complex, fully online digital product. So that's been my journey.
And do you have in your own journey a favorite kind of thing that you've done where you feel like this is where I got my maximum learning, or this is something that I built that I'm like, and I'm sure it's everything you're proud of, but when we were like, I built this, like I can see it exist in reality, and it's giving me like I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I think all of my jobs actually, because every job I've done has resulted in a redesign.
Okay.
So that's been just, I think it's been coincidence, but it's because I'm joining companies at this sort of pivot, this moment when they're going towards a digital transformation.
Yeah.
So every job I've done has turned into a redesign that has been significantly better than what's come before.
Yeah.
It's got really like driven business change. And I've really enjoyed that. But then I've also really enjoyed two very early startups I've worked on as well, where there was a very basic app or very basic MVP, and I've taken it and turned it into a really high functioning product that's generated VC investment of over $1 million. It's got lots of traction. So I've loved that as well, even though it's much smaller. But everything I think has that core through it of turning something that's maybe not quite so good or something that's quite an early stage product into something that's concrete, high functioning, and people really love using. And that's not been me, that's been because everything you do is a team sport.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I love about digital design. It's not somebody just going off and like coming back and saying, ta-da, here it is. It's a really complex ecosystem of people coming together and you doing this iterative approach and working with users to build something really amazing. So that's the other part. I just love the humanity and working with teams, working with amazing people to bring something new into the world.
Yeah, and that was literally going to be my next question. So being a product designer, there's just so many different teams you have to coordinate with. There's engineers, and there's creatives, and there's just product management people. And so how would you say through your career you've learned better or like know how to now manage like these big complex teams? Because I've seen you've managed teams of 15 up until 100, so you've been through the whole journey. So what is kind of your key learnings from being a good product designer but also a manager?
Gosh, well, the management, let me think about this. Maybe I'll talk about the management one first.
Yeah.
I think that's just something that I learned by doing and often making mistakes.
Yeah.
But I've always tried to be just really clear and direct and a decent person. So, trying to make sure that the team have clarity about what they're doing, they have great feedback, that I help them grow in their career as well, that I'm able to sort of create the space for them to do great work.
Yeah.
And I think I'm quite good at that. I think I've worked with some amazing people and I really love growing and enabling people. Where it has gone wrong in retrospect is that I probably spent too much time enabling my team and pushing my team forward and lifting them up and getting them to talk about the work. And I've been much in the background. And I've realised that that's when changes come, that the new manager is like, oh, what does Jane actually do? And I'm like, well, I do so much, but I haven't built that internal reputation. I've worked with the team and the team know what I do, and my direct manager knows what I do. But when there's organisational change, I hadn't built that personal brand outside of this small part of the organisation. So that's been a big learning. And I'd say to anyone, particularly in design management, which is about being empathetic often and about sort of trying to lift people up, that you need to also work on your own personal brand. You need to make sure that people know what you're doing, and you need to talk about it through the lens of business impact.
Yeah.
So you can say, like, I and my team have, we've redesigned the subscription flow and subscriptions increased 42%, which means this much money, and then make sure everybody knows. So I think there's two aspects to being a leader. One is leading the team, and the other one is sort of managing up or leading by influence and making sure everyone in the organisation understands the impact of your team and the impact of you personally. And that's something I didn't realise until reasonably recently.
Oh, nice. No, that's really good advice, because people sometimes forget, like you said, I think to build their own brand and kind of just stand up for themselves sometimes, right?
Yes.
It's a little bit harder always. Like, I loved that you said, I'm actually really good at that. Like, that to me shows that, like, you know what you're doing. You've been doing it for long enough to feel confident in it.
Yes.
But to that point, do you ever feel like imposter syndrome, where you feel like, oh my God, I've been here forever and I still don't know what I'm doing, or I haven't been here that long and I don't know what I'm doing? Do you ever get those feelings, or is that only for us?
I used to get it really, really badly. I don't know what's happened. I think it's just getting older. Part of me is just like, I know what I'm doing. There was a sort of moment of revelation, maybe about 10 years ago, when I suddenly, there was a person that a team that I inherited, and this person thought, I don't quite know, they were just not being a great team member for a long time. And then I ended up having to deal with this person that they were, just being really lazy, being rude to their teammates, and I was trying really hard to be nice. And I had this like light bulb moment. I was like, I don't like this person, so why do I care if they like me? It's not about being liked, it's about being respected. Suddenly it was like this weight lifted off my shoulder that it didn't really matter if I was liked. It wasn't, this was not a personal relationship. Yeah. So then I was able to manage this person and deal with how dreadful they were being. And that was like one of these moments where the imposter syndrome slightly fell away, because I didn't care so much that it was being liked for myself. Yeah. I realised that there was something different here. Of course I still get it, but then I worked really hard to make sure I really understand what I'm working on. I understand the organisation, I understand the business behind it, I understand what I'm doing, and I know I've done this successfully quite a few times. So I work really hard to try and disperse the imposter syndrome by knowledge and also bringing my experience, but it's always there, isn't it? I don't know if it's a female thing or just a human thing, but confidence is so important, and it's really, it can get knocked quite easily sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, I think it's just about knowing your worth and knowing that. I think for me the big thing was realizing that not everyone knows 100% what they're doing. No. So I think when I was younger, like with my family, with my parents, with my work, like with the work environment that I was in university or even in the corporate world, I always thought everybody else knows exactly what they're doing and I don't, and that was the problem. But now I've realized actually a lot of people don't know what they're doing, and everyone's figuring it out.
Yes.
Like
it's so true.
The whole process is not like foolproof. Like everybody is just working along the way. And tell us, so you've now moved to Contentsquare. You're really enjoying it.
Yes.
What are you most excited about in terms of the way you explained it? It sounds like it's a really great product.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
So is your role to make it better? Are you going to change something? Maybe you're not allowed to say, I don't know. But is there, what is the thing that's really driving you there?
The sort of leadership team really want to have ease of use as a key aspect to the product. It's super complex. So this vision, I think, is to make it easier to use, to get faster time to value, to make it almost bring that consumer mindset to B2B, to think about how can we make this a really seamless, enjoyable experience where people can get value from it really, really quickly and then make really great decisions from it. So it's a really, really powerful tool, but it's complex. I think putting that layer of ease and simplicity on the top of this incredibly powerful tool, it's an amazing challenge. So I'm really excited. That's probably one of the things I'm most excited about. And then the culture is fabulous. Just everyone's so nice and supportive and friendly. So to be able to work on this incredibly challenging thing, but with a supportive team, it's brilliant. Yeah, it doesn't happen every day. So I'm super excited.
No, that sounds really nice. We speak about ease in products.
Yeah.
And one thing I think that brings about that ease in some ways is the advent of emerging technologies, right?
Oh, yes,
we've seen the advent of AI and Web3 and the whole lot of it. How do you think that has changed the way people interact with products? And what do you think the future looks like?
So I think right now we're this kind of, if AI is this tool, and for some people it's a solution in search of a problem. There's all AIs like Web3 as well. So but I think that AI has probably got a much more practical application than a lot of Web3 technologies like crypto and, oh gosh, that's another thing, like blockchain for pet services. I remember seeing, I was like, what?
What does that even mean?
Yes, exactly. So that's why I always talk about, solve real problems. I don't know what blockchain for pet services meant, and this was a startup I saw. So, but I think AI really does have a practical application, because you mentioned earlier that there's so much competing for our attention, there's so much data, there's so much going on, there's so much to kind of parse and understand. And where I don't think AI is incredibly, or is often not very creative, it's kind of a rehash of other people's creativity. And I don't see much excitement and newness happening there. But what I think it is incredible for is taking all this complexity and putting a layer on it that is practical and simple and surfaces the things you need to know and helps parse all of this data and all of these things happening, almost like an assistant that helps you understand what's going on in the world. Yeah. So that I think is super exciting. I really can't wait to see the application of how AI can bring together all of these data sources, all of these things happening in your life, and support you to just make your life a little bit easier, to make decisions easier, to connect with other people more easily. So I'm really excited about how AI is going to be a layer on top of the internet, almost on top of all this data, that is like a human support agent.
And it comes and synthesizes it for us,
Yes.
isn't it? Do you think, though, that with these technologies, there is so much synthesis that it sometimes allows you to get lazy, back to your point, as a human, and stop making the effort to think? Like, do you think people, when they were studying, when they were younger, doing product or any of the other fields, they actually had to put thought into a lot more things? Whereas now, if I just go to open ChatGPT and say 5 aspects of a perfect product, I'll get some. Of course, it doesn't include the experience of someone else, but do you think it makes us lazier?
Probably. It's a great point, isn't it? And also they call it hallucinations, that the information that ChatGPT is relaying to you isn't entirely correct. I know that one of the tools was using Reddit as a data source, and Reddit, I'm a huge Reddit fan, but there's a lot of like joking. There's a rude word for it in Reddit, and one of them was about putting glue on pizza to make the mozzarella stringy.
Yeah.
It was a joke, and then this was replayed as a fact on one of the AI tools. If you want to make your pizza even more delicious, put glue on it. So I think this is where it comes back to the philosophy degree. People still need to learn how to think and how to be able to fathom what's true and what isn't. But I don't think that's a problem with AI. The entire internet is absolutely awash with disinformation. If you look at what's been happening in Britain over the last couple of days, or with that Olympic boxer, I remember reading the lies around the world before the truth gets its shoes on.
Yeah.
So it's not really AI that's causing lots of these problems, just misinformation everywhere. So I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if AI is going to make us lazy, possibly, but we're lazy already.
Yeah, exactly. It's just making us lazy.
So I think the best thing is if and it's not just for AI, if people can understand how to intelligently interrogate what they're being told, but it's not happening.
Yeah,
So
no, fair enough. Yeah, no, thank you so much. That was so useful. It was great chatting with you.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
And we can't wait to do this again.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you so much for having me.
If you found this episode interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.